The evening sky was painted in shades of bruised purple and ink black, clouds swollen with unspoken grief, promising a storm that had long been brewing. Rain began to pour over the silent city, each drop falling like a tear from heaven, soaking the streets in sorrow. The park, usually filled with laughter and lovers, stood still under the downpour, except for a crumpled figure on a bench, drenched, trembling, and barely conscious. Eleanor, a girl in her early 20s, with eyes that once held dreams but were now heavy with exhaustion. Her clothes were soaked through, clinging to her frail body, her lips pale, and her arms wrapped tightly around herself as if she could somehow shield herself from the world. Passers-by walked past, umbrellas raised, never looking down, never stopping, until one car pulled over. It was sleek, black, and expensive, clearly out of place in this neighborhood. The man who stepped out wore a perfectly tailored coat, his shoes untouched by mud, his presence powerful but quiet. Gabriel Sterling, one of the wealthiest men in the country, known for his ruthlessness in business and silence in the public eye. But tonight, under the cold spray of rain, he looked less like a billionaire and more like a man haunted by something deeper, something that pulled him toward the unconscious girl on the bench. He knelt beside her, hesitated, and gently touched her wrist. Her pulse was faint. She stirred but didn't wake. Without a second thought, he lifted her into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, a feather burdened by the storms of life. He held her as if she were made of glass, shielding her from the rain with his own coat as he placed her in the back of his car. The driver looked back in alarm. "Mr. Sterling." "Drive," Gabriel said sharply. "Take us home. Now." The Sterling mansion wasn't a home. It was a fortress carved out of marble and steel, a modern-day castle set on the edge of the city. Most of its rooms hadn't seen footsteps in years. Cold, clean, and clinical, the kind of place that reflected the emptiness of its master. When Gabriel carried the girl into his private wing, even the staff looked stunned. He barked an order to call the doctor and laid her down in one of the guest rooms, one with a view of the garden and a fireplace he had never once lit. As the fire flickered to life and warmth returned to the room, so did Eleanor's color. But she didn't wake. Not that night. Gabriel sat beside her for hours, not knowing why he couldn't walk away. There was something about her face, fragile yet resilient, like someone who had seen the worst of life and still held on. He studied the dirt beneath her nails, the bruises on her arms, and the faded photo she clutched in her fist, a little girl holding hands with an older woman, both smiling despite the poverty that framed them. Who was she? Why was she alone in the rain? He didn't ask anyone. Not yet. He just waited. Morning came soft and golden, the rain reduced to a whisper against the glass. Birds chirped hesitantly outside, as if testing whether the world was safe again. Eleanor stirred. She blinked against the sunlight and sat up with a gasp, eyes wild, breath shallow. She clutched the blanket to her chest, her gaze darting around the unfamiliar room. Marble walls, tall windows, a fireplace. Too quiet, too elegant. It felt like a dream or a trap. She nearly screamed when she saw the man standing by the door. "You're awake," Gabriel said, voice low but calm. He stepped forward slowly. "You collapsed in the park. I brought you here." She backed up on the bed. "Who are you? What is this place?" "You're safe," he said. "My name is Gabriel Sterling. I didn't mean to frighten you." Her face twisted in disbelief. "Sterling? As in, Sterling Corporation?" Her voice cracked with disbelief. "Why would someone like you?" He didn't answer. He simply placed a tray of warm food on the side table and stepped away. "You were unconscious for hours," he added gently. "The doctor said you needed rest. Eat something." Eleanor stared at the food. Her stomach growled, betraying her pride. But her hands trembled when she reached for the spoon. "I didn't take anything," she said suddenly. "If you think I'm a thief, I'm not. I was just trying to get through the night." Gabriel raised an eyebrow. "I never said you were." She looked up, confused. "Then why help me?" He didn't know how to answer that. For a moment, he looked away. Sometimes, he finally said, you just know when someone needs saving. Silence filled the room. Eleanor took a shaky bite of the soup and closed her eyes, savoring warmth she hadn't felt in days. Her shoulders relaxed, if only slightly. Gabriel turned to leave, but she called after him. What's the catch?
He paused.
There isn't one. But even as he said it, something inside both of them stirred. A quiet shift. A connection neither fully understood. Later that day, Eleanor explored the room, finding a clean set of clothes left for her. She changed and stood by the window, looking out at the sprawling garden. It was like something out of a storybook. So far from the streets she had called home. She didn't belong here. She pressed her hand against the glass, lost in thought, until she noticed Gabriel watching her from across the lawn. He stood in the shadows of a stone archway, almost as if he, too, didn't belong in the place he had built. Their eyes met across the distance. And in that moment, something unspoken passed between them. Not love. Not yet. But something softer. Recognition. That evening, Gabriel returned with a question. Who is the woman in the photo you were holding? Eleanor stiffened. My mother. She died last year. I'm sorry. She was everything to me. Her voice faltered. After she passed, I lost our apartment. I've been living in shelters. I tried getting work, but no one wants someone with no address and no references. Her words fell like stones, sharp and heavy. I'm not asking for pity, she added quickly. I didn't think I'd wake up in a mansion. Gabriel didn't pity her. He admired her strength, though he didn't say it out loud. Instead, he said, you can stay here until you figure things out. Her eyes widened. Why would you do that? Again, he had no answer. Or maybe he had too many. Let's just say, he murmured, you remind me of someone I lost. Eleanor watched him for a long time, then gave the smallest nod. All right, she whispered. But just until I get back on my feet. Gabriel nodded, but deep down, he already knew this was just the beginning of something neither of them expected. Something that would change both their lives forever. The days passed like gentle waves, quiet, steady, and strangely comforting. Eleanor stayed tucked away in the grand room of the Sterling mansion, still unsure of her place, but slowly healing. Her bruises faded, the bags under her eyes softened, and her steps grew stronger. But there was a part of her that remained guarded. Every time Gabriel entered the room, she straightened her back, her eyes alert, careful not to seem too comfortable. She didn't want to owe him anything, especially not gratitude. She kept telling herself, this is temporary. I don't belong here. He'll eventually get bored of playing savior. But Gabriel didn't get bored. In fact, he was around more than she expected. At breakfast, he asked how she slept. In the evenings, he offered her books from his personal library. He never pried into her past, never pressed for details. It was like he understood that trust was earned slowly, like the opening of a flower after a long winter. And still something about him felt haunted. One morning, Eleanor found the courage to wander the mansion. Her bare feet echoed down the marble hallways as she passed silent rooms filled with art, glass, and golden silence. Everything looked untouched, as if no one had truly lived here for a long time. She reached the library. It wasn't just large, it was colossal. Shelves stretching toward the ceiling, ladders on rails, a fireplace burning low. And at the center of it all, Gabriel. He was seated in a deep leather chair, reading. The moment he looked up, Eleanor froze. You're up early, he said, his voice calm but tinged with surprise. I couldn't sleep. She hesitated, then stepped in. This place is beautiful, but lonely. He gave a quiet nod. It's been that way for a long time. She sat across from him, folding her hands in her lap. Why me? Gabriel closed the book. What do you mean? You said I reminded you of someone you lost, she said, voice low. Who was she? He didn't answer right away. A flicker of pain passed over his face, a shadow from long ago. My younger sister, he finally said. Her name was Leah. She died when she was your age. Eleanor's breath caught. I'm sorry. She was kind.
Bright.
always trying to fix people. She used to volunteer at shelters. She wanted to be a doctor. But life wasn't kind to her. His voice cracked, just slightly, and it was enough to shake something loose inside Eleanor. I know what it's like, she said softly. To lose someone and feel like the world doesn't care. Their eyes met in the dim firelight, and for the first time, Eleanor saw beyond the billionaire exterior. Behind the fame and fortune was a man bearing guilt, not glory. The next few days settled into a rhythm. Eleanor helped in the kitchen, despite the chef's protests. She walked the garden in the early mornings. Sometimes she even laughed, softly, like a memory being reborn. Gabriel began sharing meals with her. Simple conversations grew into longer ones. He was intelligent, but quiet. She was sharp, observant, and brave in ways that surprised even herself. One evening, as they sat on the terrace overlooking the lake, Eleanor asked the question that had been tugging at her thoughts. What happened to her, your sister? Gabriel took a long breath. The air smelled like jasmine and old rain. She trusted the wrong people, he said. She fell in love with someone who used her, left her. And when she had nowhere to go, she didn't come to me. I was too busy building my empire. I didn't even realize she was gone until it was too late. Eleanor looked down, her voice barely a whisper. So, helping me is a second chance for you? No, he said quietly. Helping you is the right thing to do. That's all. She wanted to believe him, and maybe deep down she already did. That night, Eleanor had a dream. She was walking through a forest, barefoot, the trees whispering secrets. A girl walked beside her. Gabriel's sister, maybe. They didn't speak, but there was comfort in the silence. At the edge of a clearing, Eleanor saw herself as a child, standing alone with empty hands. Then someone placed a key in her palm. She woke up with tears on her cheeks. The next day, everything changed. It started with a phone call. Gabriel was in his study when his assistant, Daniel, rushed in. Sir, Daniel whispered urgently. The girl, Eleanor, she's been in the news. Someone's looking for her. Gabriel's eyes narrowed. What do you mean? Daniel showed him the screen. A grainy photo of Eleanor, taken at a soup kitchen weeks ago, was posted on a blog. The caption read, Missing girl, is she hiding something? Gabriel felt his chest tighten. That evening, as Eleanor helped slice fruit in the kitchen, he entered with the article in his hand. Is there something you're not telling me? He asked gently. Eleanor froze. Her knife clattered onto the counter. She turned slowly, her expression falling like shattered glass. I didn't want to drag you into my mess, she whispered. I thought I could just disappear. Start over. Gabriel stepped closer. Start over from what? She looked down, breathing hard. Then, she met his gaze and, for the first time, told the truth. I was a caretaker for an elderly woman, she said. She passed away, but her greedy relatives blamed me. Said I manipulated her, stole from her. I didn't. But they were powerful. I ran because I was scared they'd destroy me. Gabriel listened without interruption. You think I'm lying, she said bitterly. I don't, he replied. She blinked, startled. I've met enough liars to know the difference, he added. Her eyes filled with tears she fought hard to contain. You believe me? He nodded. I do. It was the first time someone had said those words to her in months. And it meant everything. Later that night, Eleanor stood by the garden pond. The moon shimmered across the water's surface. Gabriel joined her, his coat draped across his arm. You know, she said, watching the ripples, you're not what I expected from a billionaire. And you're not what I expected from a stranger in the rain. She laughed softly. You always rescue girls in parks? Only the ones who look like they've forgotten how to ask for help. The silence that followed was warm, heavy, filled with 1,000 unspoken things. Finally, she said, Thank you for not treating me like a problem to be fixed. And he replied, Thank you for reminding me I'm still human. As they stood side by side, neither of them noticed the figure watching them from the shadows of the trees. A camera clicked, and just like that, the storm they thought they had escaped was about to return. The rain had started again, gentle at first, like a whisper over the mansion's rooftop. But to Eleanor, it felt like a warning. She stood in the garden, her hands clenched around the photo from the anonymous envelope. The message written in red ink haunted her. "You took what wasn't yours. Now we take everything." She slipped the photo into her coat pocket and turned slowly toward the house. Inside, the warmth and silence felt surreal, like the calm before a storm. Gabriel was in his office on a call, his voice low and intense. She didn't interrupt. She needed a moment to breathe, to think. But her mind wouldn't stop racing. Was this really about the inheritance? Or was there something deeper, more personal behind this threat? Upstairs, Gabriel ended the call and stared at his phone, jaw tense. The voice on the other end, an old contact from Wall Street, had confirmed his fear. Howard Langston had dug up a buried deal from a decade ago. A failed biotech investment Gabriel had pulled out of before the company collapsed. Dozens of lives were ruined in the fallout. Gabriel had quietly paid reparations. But now, Langston was twisting the story to look like fraud. If that narrative hit the media now, paired with his connection to Eleanor, it wouldn't just ruin his name. It would destroy her too. He rose from his desk and walked to the window. Eleanor was sitting on the edge of the fountain, her face lifted to the drizzle. She looked fragile, tired, but also unshakably brave. He realized then he couldn't keep shielding her from the truth. He had to tell her everything. Later that night, by the fireplace, Gabriel poured them both a glass of wine. Eleanor sat curled on the couch, the flames reflecting in her eyes. "There's something I need to tell you," he said, his voice quiet. She turned, sensing the weight in his tone. 10 years ago, he began, "I made a decision that changed everything. I invested in a company promising life-saving treatments. But their research was fake. I found out too late. I pulled out before the crash, but others didn't." Eleanor listened silently. "I used my own money to compensate families. No one went to jail. But the headlines painted me as the villain. I vanished from public life for years. Built my fortune back quietly. I thought I could bury it. But Langston, he found the crack." She didn't flinch. Instead, she said softly, "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because they'll use it against you. They'll say you're with me for the money, that you're part of a pattern." She leaned forward, her voice steady. "Then let them. I won't be ashamed for being saved. And I won't be scared for being cared for." He looked at her, heart caught in his throat. "Even if it gets worse?" "Especially if it does." For a long moment, neither spoke. The fire crackled between them. Then she reached out and took his hand. And something unspoken passed between them, an understanding deeper than any confession. But peace was not theirs to keep. That night, the mansion's security alarms blared. Gabriel shot out of bed, grabbing the remote monitor. A dark figure had crossed the property gate, quick, agile, and prepared. By the time his guards reached the west wing, the intruder was gone, but the garden was torn up, papers scattered by the pond, and a chilling message spray-painted on the stone wall. "He can't save you from what's coming." Eleanor stood behind Gabriel, her breath visible in the cold night air, her hands shaking. "It's them," she whispered. "The Langstons. They're not just trying to smear us, they want to break us." Gabriel nodded grimly. "Then we fight back harder." The next day, Gabriel called a press conference. The ballroom of a downtown hotel overflowed with reporters. The air buzzed with tension. Eleanor watched from the side, fingers clenched, heart hammering. Gabriel stepped up to the podium. He didn't defend. He didn't deflect. Instead, he told the truth. About the investment, the failure, the families, the reparations. And about Eleanor, how he found her unconscious in the park, and how her presence helped him face the person he'd once tried to forget. "She didn't ask for my protection," he said. "She earned my respect, my trust, and maybe my heart." The room went still. Flashes fired. Reporters shouted. But Gabriel didn't hear any of it. His eyes were on Eleanor. And for the first time in years, he wasn't afraid of being seen. The backlash was brutal. Articles screamed, "Scandalous savior. Billionaire falls for nurse accused of fraud. A romance built on lies?" But something unexpected happened too. The people Gabriel had helped, families who had once lost everything, came forward. They spoke of how he had shown up with quiet apologies and blank checks, offering hope when they had none. One widow said, "He didn't just repay the money. He repaid the dignity." The public opinion began to shift. And Eleanor became something of a symbol. A woman who had nothing, but chose to love a man with everything and stand by him when it cost her safety, name, and peace. Still, the Langstons weren't done. Howard filed a new lawsuit claiming Eleanor manipulated the old woman in her care. A final blow designed to crush her once and for all. Gabriel's legal team worked day and night. But it was Eleanor who turned the tide. She produced a letter, handwritten, fragile with age, from the old woman herself, thanking Eleanor for giving her more comfort in her final months than her own children ever did. She had left the inheritance not out of manipulation, but gratitude. The court dismissed the Langstons' claims. The case collapsed. Eleanor was free. That evening, she stood once more in the garden, where the lilies had begun to bloom again. Gabriel joined her, silent for a while. Then he said, "There's one thing I haven't said yet." She looked at him. He stepped closer. "I love you." The words hung in the air, simple, but heavy with meaning. She smiled. Not the fragile, uncertain smile of before, but the kind gentle, that said she had found home. Healing. "I love you began too," to fall once whispered. More. And the rain, gentle, soft, healing, began to fall once more. Months passed. The media storm died down. The lawsuit was dismissed. And Eleanor found herself no longer seen as the poor girl rescued in a park, but a woman who had walked through fire and emerged unburned. Yet, peace didn't come easy. She sat on the rooftop terrace one morning, watching the sunrise bleed across the sky in shades of orange and gold. The wind played gently with her hair. Below, the mansion buzzed with quiet activity, but up here, it was just her and the weight of choices she hadn't yet made. Gabriel had asked her to stay, to build a life with him, not just under his roof, but in his heart. And she loved him. That part was certain. But something inside her whispered that before she could say yes to a future, she had to make peace with her past. That night, she told him, "I need to go," she said softly, her voice barely a whisper. His face fell. "For how long?" "I don't know," she replied honestly. "There's a part of me I left behind a long time ago. I think I need to find her again." Gabriel didn't try to stop her. He nodded slowly and kissed her forehead. "I'll wait," he said, "even if it takes forever." Eleanor returned to the city where it had all begun. The orphanage was still there, worn, faded, and full of memories. She spent her days volunteering, teaching children how to read, how to imagine stories bigger than their pain. Every night, she wrote letters to Gabriel she never sent. And every night, he read her last text again. "Thank you for showing me I was never invisible." One morning, as she helped a young girl tie her shoelaces, a shadow fell across the doorway. She looked up. Gabriel stood there, not in a suit, not in his tailored shoes, but in jeans, his hair tousled by the wind, holding a paper bag with warm cinnamon rolls. "I figured," he said, smiling gently, "if I can't convince you to come back yet, I'd bring a piece of home here." Her eyes welled up. She stood slowly and walked into his arms. "I missed you," she whispered. "Every single day," he replied. They didn't speak of rings or riches, or the scandals that had once tried to define them. They spoke of now, of planting roots in a small community, of opening a learning center for kids like Eleanor once was, of love, not as a rescue, but as a choice. A year later, on the steps of a tiny brick building with peeling paint, but a heart full of dreams, Gabriel and Eleanor opened the Lily House, a place for abandoned children to find warmth, meals, books, and hope. And on that day, he slipped a small, modest ring onto her finger. Not because she needed it, but because she finally wanted it. Years later, their love story became legend, not for the wealth or the scandal, but for the truth it taught the world. That even the coldest nights can break into sunrise, that even broken people can find home again, and that the greatest kind of rescue isn't found